Okay, can you hear?
That looks good.
All right.
Hold on one second. The other thing that you want to remember when you're filming, and I'll probably be there with the interviews that you guys film, is that you don't want to, have lots and lots of white space. Sometimes people take pictures and it's like they feel like their horizon has to be right in the middle of the picture. It doesn't. It's better if you only have a little bit of sky. But you want to make sure that you don't have like Chuck's head way down at the bottom. And okay, we'll come back up here. There we go. All right. I think we're working, recording. Okay. Chuck, thank you for coming in today.
Super.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, your growing up in Joliet, and how long you've lived in Joliet.
Yeah. I basically have lived in Joliet all of my life, or in the surrounding area. Went to school through Joliet schools, St. John the Baptist Catholic School, which happened to be the school that our sisters came to this area from and founded the congregation at that parish. Went on to Joliet Catholic High School, then a boys' school up on the hill, now Victory Center for those of you that drive around the area a little bit. Then went on to college and enrolled at a beast called Louis St. Francis of Illinois when the two schools were attempting a merger. Graduated from college and actually worked a year in my family's business. We had an automobile business that we operated for about 52 years. And after doing that for a year, was approached by someone that I knew at St. Francis who said, we're bringing the business programs to St. Francis now. Would you do recruitment for us for that? And thought, oh, well, I'll try it for a year or two. And so a year or two later, I'm still here.
I almost forgot. Can you give us your verbal permission to use any?
Absolutely not.
All right, turn it off.
Yeah.
No, are you okay if
Sure.
we use this in
Absolutely.
any little documentary snippets? Okay.
I'll deny it all.
Yeah.
Film was edited.
Exactly. It's not true. Okay. Our documentary starts with obviously something that's a little before, your memories, but we want to look at sort of the boom town of Joliet, which actually let me ask you that. When do you see the real economic boom years of Joliet, when population was flooding in, businesses were opening?
Yeah.
Like,
Joliet, really mirrored what happened in the country, I would say, in that, as industry was growing in the country, you saw that industry locate in this region. So you had, the longtime employers such as United States Steel here, EJ&E Railroad initially, then the newer players, Caterpillar Tractor coming in. All of that led to the growth of the area, which predominantly was a manufacturing and blue-collar type of town. Joliet, to its credit, though, was just far enough away from the city of Chicago that it had to develop on its own, and it was lucky with both rivers and rail, and later highway, that it was accessible from a lot of different perspectives. An interesting story is told that during the Depression, when the banks closed in '32, and you history majors can check that date, Frank Turk Sr., who was still alive during the Renaissance in the 80s, Frank Turk Sr. was a young man, got together with a number of the leading businessmen, and Joliet literally developed its own script system. So to try to continue commerce moving so that you as a family member could go to a store and get some bread, get some gasoline for your car or whatever, they developed their own script that was used right within the city, and you could use it to exchange for goods and services and whatever. So, even at that point in time, there was enough independence that regardless of what's going on in the region, in the state, or in the nation, let's sit down and see if we can figure out a way around this. And they did it at that time. And they did it again in the 80s when the decline occurred.
So wait, you're saying that during the Depression, the banks closed, Joliet had its own currency?
Right. Script, they call it.
I never knew that.
Yeah,
That's kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
And this was something that the business leaders did
Right.
to sort of help.
Because they knew they had people who needed to put food on the table. They knew they had people who needed fuel to either heat the home or go to work or whatever. So what are we going to do to keep these things moving? Because people either don't have money, can't access money from the banks, or of course, a lot of people were just completely unemployed. And we've got to do something to get something in their hands to do a limited amount of trade and exchange.
Wow. I'm going to come back to Frank Turk, because I know in the 80s, he was one of the people sort of helped pushing for Joliet's kind of
Rebirth, yes.
rebirth. But let's talk a little bit about, do you remember much about the ethnic neighborhoods of Joliet?
Joliet, again, was almost a microcosm of Chicago in that people settled into different areas around the community. So you had your, in fact, if you want to trace the roots, follow the Catholic parishes. St. Patrick's was an Irish parish. Well, a lot of the Irish settled up in that area, and the Irish came into the area historically dealing with the excavation of the canal to deepen that to enable more waterway traffic. The Germans were at St. John's on Hickory Street in Division. So each of the parishes and the ethnic groups would settle right around that parish and typically live. The east side of Joliet had a lot of the Poles over there, and then as more and more African Americans moved into the community, in my day, the east side of Joliet, particularly the southeast side, was more African American families lived in that particular neighborhood and region. So not unlike Chicago, and any of you that talk to grandparents that moved to the burbs out of Chicago, we were very much like Chicago with neighborhoods with different ethnic groups clustering there, and typically the groups clustering around churches or parishes.
Okay. Tell us let's see, you said you were graduated from high school 71. Okay. What was Joliet, did you ever consider going someplace else? You went to school here. Did you consider moving out? What was Joliet like in the 70s?
The big thing I think that keeps people in Joliet is because it is an entity in and of itself. When you're here for a while, you get to know everybody and everybody knows you. People commented, and just with the recent passing of Gordy Gillespie, Gordy left for 10 years and went up to Wisconsin to coach at Ripon. And one of the things he hated when he was up there is he would walk in to get his glasses fixed at an optometrist, go in to, get some groceries or get a service done or whatever. Nobody knew who Gordy Gillespie was. He could walk in any place around Joliet and they knew him by face, if not by name. And I think that along with family roots, up until maybe recent history of the last 10 or 20 years, people talking about generations or the immediate family of one or two generations all living within the region, and that family atmosphere that could be sustained because of the fact that the brothers or sisters were no more than 15, 20 minutes apart from one another was a real attraction to trying to stay here. Plus the fact that we had a really good job base with the major employers in industry. People could get a good job if they had an education, move along in a career, and settle down with a good retirement and good health care benefits at the end of all of that. So there was really no reason to go anyplace else because you had a lot of the advantages of a larger city and still on a smaller size.
I think of Banana Joe's as one of those institutions that have sort of, I'm assuming, been here for generations. Are there any others that are still around that?
Fewer and fewer. It's sort of sad to see. I know my dad passed away last fall, and a number of the old automobile families showed up at the wake that I had not seen. And these were not the gentlemen that were the corporate owners. This was the next generation, their kids that either hadn't gotten into the family business or knew of my father through the family business, but through their parents and whatever. we're seeing less and less of that. You know, like many communities, you're getting the chains, the big box stores, whatever coming in, and that longevity of the family-owned business isn't there anymore. Last night I was down here for a meeting, and when I drove by on, what's the next one over here to the west? Who knows their streets? No, Chicago's in front of us. The next, Ottawa Street. I drove by, and right across from the deck, if you walk straight through the deck here, the building that you come to at the corner was Lieberman's Jewelry on the first store. Again, long-time, multi-generational family that operated that. I remember when they were building the deck, Lieberman's building, that building that you see there, was on this side of the street. And the city wanted to demolish it, and the Lieberman family, oh no, we've owned this for a couple generations, and our jewelry business, yada yada. We're going to move the building. So they literally picked the building up, moved it across the street to the location you see it at now. Well, the building is vacant because a number of years later, the Liebermans first left the downtown because there wasn't the business base to support their jewelry business, and then they moved to the far west side of Joliet out onto Essington, and since then the two brothers that picked up the business after the most recent generation of parent passed away decided they didn't want to be in the jewelry business anymore. So you see things like that there aren't that many families anymore that are around that were in business in those days that still have a going concern. Probably one of the few is the Jacobs family with the Chevrolet dealership. They again were downtown, just a few doors down from where St. Joseph's Church is on the north end of Chicago Street, and that family still operates with, let's see, Bill was the senior, so Billy Jr., and now his sons are operating that, third generation.
Tell us about your dad's business, and then I want to hear a little bit. I mean, part of the reason I wanted to interview is I remember a year or so ago we were talking about what happened to your dad's business during the Joliet riots. So tell us a little bit about your dad's car business, and then we'll talk.
Well, it actually started again with my grandfather. A great opportunity and a way for success in this country was the automobile business. People were getting cars, becoming much more mobile in the country, and so back in 1922, he was able to get a franchise of then Nash Company, it was called. And it was not uncommon that families that just had some space and were interested in going into business could get these franchises, as opposed to nowadays, if you went out and tried to get an automobile franchise, you probably would literally have to have a minimum of $500,000, if not $1 million, to get a hold of one. So anyway, it was a great access to become your own business person and hopefully develop well. So he started with that at that point in time, passed it down eventually to my father, and then we ended up actually moving the business as well out of Joliet. We were downtown for all of those years, and in 1980, surprisingly, when things were going south in the downtown area, we moved out to Plainfield and moved to a spot just a little bit west of Louis Joliet Mall and operated the business out there for another 10 years before my dad got rid of that. So it was a great opportunity, number one, for families to get into business themselves. Number two, the hopes of obviously acquiring wealth. Number three, jobs and opportunities for the rest of the family, because it was not uncommon that these dealers would get their sons and some of their peripheral relatives involved in the business. So it truly they were family businesses, and even if you worked for them, I can remember a number of the mechanics retiring from my grandfather's business after 40 and 45 years of working for him, and they talked about, for example, during the recession, the Depression, they said, we know your grandfather went home many a week and many months without any money at all for the family. But we always had our paychecks because he knew we needed it. We had to pay our bills. We had to feed our families. And they said, we will respect him forever because of that, because, we think of now how business operates, and we know that not every business manager has the best interest of their employees at hand. But it was a different era, different generation, and people had different types of ethics in terms of how they operated their organization. and that was one thing that they said, you know, made us endeared to your grandfather to work for him for a lifetime. You know, later bringing in retirement programs and health care benefits from them. One of the interesting stories I think about now, listening to the schedule of auto dealers open, my grandfather in the early days of the automobile business first got it passed regionally here, and then got a statewide law passed that you couldn't sell cars on Sunday. And it wasn't, I don't think, so much from a religious type of perspective of how can we do business on Sundays, but more his concern was my salespeople, that, you know, when you're open for business, the salespeople have to be there if they want to make money, and they're working on commission. They never had time for their families. So first it was a Sunday closing, then it was we're going to close the businesses Saturday at 5 o'clock, so they have Saturday evening and Sunday off. And then eventually they closed on Wednesday evenings to give the people another evening off, that they didn't have to be there, to ensure that they didn't lose out on a sales commission or whatever. But, you know, those were types of things people thought about then for the benefit of their staff that work with them. Because again, these people were all like family. We did Christmas parties that, you know, they and their families came to. We had picnics that the families came to. So we not only knew the person that worked for us, we knew the spouse, and many times we knew the kids.
Okay. Hold on one second. Sometimes